Dellinger with the ACC exploring new revenue structure to resolve the Florida State Clemson lawsuits. The first reactions are, well, the ACC would like to do this because they may not have faith in their grant of rights in the court system. And then Florida State and Clemson may want to do this because, well, they know they probably can't leave anytime soon because they don't know what's going to happen with them. Honestly, I'm kind of worn out with the story, but it is at least the next part of whatever the heck's going to happen in the end.
Yeah, I think this just gets down to the fact that there's an avenue like in a settlement which is technically a win for both sides, but then when you're outside the courtroom, or you're outside that, okay, we signed the settlement, let's walk outside, and then you have that moment in the end of The Graduate, okay, he broke up the wedding, they're on the bus. Okay, what do we do now? What's the plan after this? Because there's no guarantees for Florida State or Clemson on where they're going, how much money they're going to get, what the structure of anything is like. And for the ACC, there's no guarantee that it's not Pac-12, the sequel, where they start falling apart and other people start grabbing bits of their conference. So what happens in the future? Well, maybe you come back together, agree to something that can get you through to a certain amount of time. And David Hale had a great Twitter thread on this, saying that if Florida State and Clemson can get them to agree to shrink the grant of rights so that when all the other conferences are renegotiating their deal, there's some flexibility there, then maybe, just maybe, something can happen here. But there's still a lot that has to go on. But I think, personally, this is best for all sides. And not only best for all sides, but best for all of college athletics and football, that this kind of disruption doesn't happen, because with this one, there's no plan.
All right, but, Craig, do you think this is going to lead to anything?
I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I think it's a story worth talking about and something worth mentioning. I don't think this is as far along of a deal as people are taking it as. I saw a lot of just picking this up and running with it, and clearly some people who didn't read the article because it was treated as though it was a done deal. This is all still just a proposal. This is what this is, a proposal. It's not they're at the finish line and this is about to get wrapped up. This is who offering this up? Clemson and Florida State. Why would they do that? Oh, because they want to get out earlier. And, wow, their idea seems awfully similar to the one that they threw out months and months ago. It's like we're all the way back where we were a while back. And I would imagine that if Florida State and Clemson could have their way, let's shorten the grant of rights. We get more money based on all the categories that we benefit from, like TV audience and popularity and all those things. So we get more money than the other schools, and we get out when we want to in a timeline where we can get what we need to get done before that time comes, but it lines up perfectly with what we want to do and when we can get out, ideally, because it works out best for the other conferences. So for Florida State and Clemson, this sounds great.
Then why would the ACC and other members accept
Because they're
this?
tired of litigation, and they're tired of the nonsense, and they're tired of all the noise, and they're tired of two petulant children, especially one in Tallahassee, who just makes the entire story about the conference about this. So, I don't know. I read that part of it, and I'm like, I don't know who has the upper hand in court. It doesn't feel like either one of them does right now, but it does seem like this is Florida State and Clemson trying to expedite this process right now. So you can read that however you want to. I'm choosing not to read it either way because I'm not waiting for this so that the Big 12 can go grab NC State. I know that's why a lot of people care about it. I don't care about that right now. If that happens tomorrow, this agreement comes forth and they decide this is the way we're going to go, then yes, let's talk about what that could mean. But I think this is just more both sides trying to, once again, figure out a way to finish this off much quicker than it appears it might otherwise finish if you have to do it the traditional way through the court system and you have to unload all your reserves going back and forth for the next 3 years. And then who knows where you even end up on the other side of that. This instead would give everybody a clear outline of okay, by 2030, this thing can go its separate ways. But in the meantime, this is how we'll calm the waters. But it doesn't make sense for the ACC. It really, so we're going to, it does from the standpoint of you get out of this, but you're also conceding we give them everything that they want and then we let them out in 4 years. That's the part to me or 6 years. And that's the part to me where I'm like, so they get everything they want and you just get the quieter house, I guess, and that has less potential on the market because you've now lost two of the biggest, most attractive pieces of the house. That part of it, to me, this is very much what Florida State and Clemson want. ACC might agree to it, but it's not what they're putting forward as their ideal scenario, but it might be what they go with once this conversation continues on, just to simply get somewhere.
But this is a negotiation. So,
this isn't the end of the story.
This is Florida State and Clemson's proposal because especially in their minds, they're like, look, you can take this or we can keep going. This is at least better than keeping going because you get to guarantee the conference stays together and all of this, at least for a period of time to be determined that you can see, and there's not going to be that, and you shorten the grant of rights. And then they'll say, well, that can benefit everybody. That can benefit this, and we can get to another television negotiation. I think for stability's sake, both these sides have to do something that makes sense. So if Florida State's making a proposal, and this is also what mediation is about, and Clemson are making a proposal that says, okay, well, here's what we'd like to see, and then you can come to some sort of agreement where everybody wins and loses kind of equally in this, and the conference gets to stay together, I think that's the benefit for everybody, knowing that 6 years from now, everything could be different anyway, and you're going to want flexibility for everybody. So do that. I think this is better overall because going down the lawsuit path, everybody loses in this. Literally everybody.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, I mean, this is very much the pro FSU Clemson part of the proposal.
Yeah.
And so that's what everybody is looking at and saying, well, this doesn't make sense or that doesn't make sense. And I'm saying from the ACC standpoint, it doesn't make all that much sense. You're showing how it does a little bit, but obviously the ACC will come back and have their say on this proposal. And guess what? They already have, because they've already had this proposal out there previously.
Yeah.
So they'll revisit that. And if there's some concession made that allows this to happen, then there's a big answer unlocked when it comes to the future of whatever realignment might look like. But having it back out there certainly churned the waters, especially when they got a little choppy thanks to all the PAC news last week. And then you wondered, well, Cal Sanford, what's going to – so like that put the ACC back in the spotlight a little bit, because then you started wondering about, well, there's the side effects of the Pac-12 now and what happens with the ACC moving forward. So, I'm not surprised to see it back, but obviously this is not the end of the agreement. They're going to keep talking, but maybe it's a good sign that this is back out there in the way that it is, and that means that we are getting somewhere close to having some type of resolution.
Kim Coulter, I said this earlier with all great respect to my brother, the Dragon. The sports pundits don't like realignment. The fans do. It's not, I think we love realignment.
I don't think that's the case.
It built our audience to what was good to like, whew. And my problem with realignment is every time there's a story, there are just these like rabid realignment attention whores that will run with it. And I think what happens is more misinformation comes out of it than good. If there is a way that there's more realignment in the future, like what we saw last week in the Pac-2 to the Pac-6 and whatever else, it's great. We're used to it. But it's almost as if about the time it dies down, somebody else's scab comes off. And that's the problem I have.
I mean, that's weird because just a couple months ago, it was like, oh, Craig loves realignment. It's like, well, it just depends on what aspect of it we're talking about. So I don't have a problem talking realignment. That's, again, how we started in a lot of ways. I just gave my thoughts on this in particular. I'm just not going to spend like every day going over every single thread of this part of the story and acting as though it's the end of the world for some conference or so. Like that's the part, the playing up of it that I'm not going to partake in, and that we've seen a lot of, and nothing changed over the last year. So I'm just not going to react. I guess best way to put it is I'm just not reacting to everything like it's what's happening.
Right.
It's just a proposal. We're talking about the proposal and the merits of it, but this is not going to lead me to turn around and go like, so this means that this is and this and this, and like that's just not what I'm in the mood to do right now in regards to this story. Yeah. But this itself is very interesting, and what could happen as a result of that down the line is very interesting. I'm just not ready to jump from spot A to spot Z and take this as this is what's happening, and now this is all the dominoes that are falling. But I understand those that are going to do that, like they've done with every other little thread that's been pulled over the last few years.
If the ACC, other than FSU and Clemson, agree to this particular one, then they're idiots. Yeah, they may want at least a clarity, but don't Clemson and FSU already have a chance to get more revenue based on success?
No, I haven't agreed.
That's the whole point.
That's the whole point.
All right. So then they want that, but is this the right year for FSU to be pounded on that rock of success? I'm just
again. What does
Again,
that
what?
matter? Like that didn't matter for Texas when they went to the SEC. Why does it matter for FSU when they go out and crap the bed like they have, when this is about the legacy of these two teams and what they've done year in, year out in the conference? It didn't matter for Tech. Like, the SEC could have been like, well, Texas, if you'd have called us in 05, we'd have done that. Like, they were in the worst stretch of their history for a long time, Texas was, when they decided to make that move. Now, it's worked out for them on the back end of it because they were prepared, but what they're doing in any particular season, this is not a 2024 decision. This is a long time decision.
Well, Texas was in a situation when that story came down. A lot of people went, oh, Lord, because more them than Oklahoma might struggle. But then the convergence of NIL, transfer portal, and more, it made it the timing for them could not have been any better with the success they're having now as they enter the SEC.
Yeah, the success has nothing to do with it. That's like a Tulane fan saying, well, we've won big games the last 2 years. We deserve a spot in the pack. And it's like, it's not about what you've done that recently, good or bad. It's about the total package. So you see a lot of that, we were in this bowl game 2 years, like Washington State, Oregon State fans, when they were pitching for the Big 12, it's like, well, in the last 2 years, we've won this many games. It's like, people, that has nothing to do with you getting into the conference right now that you've won some games in the last couple of years. Like, if it was 10 years, then that's one thing. It was 20 years, that's something else. But that's not how exactly it works. So, yeah, I don't think that's a fair shot at FSU. What they're doing now has absolutely nothing to do with what's going to happen in the future. And everybody's just doing what's best for them. And so
nothing wrong with that.
So I don't know why we'd push back on it. Florida State and Clemson are trying to do what's best for them. This is clearly the best proposal for them. But that's why I was kind of trying to tap the brakes earlier, is this is their proposal. This is a proposal that's already been out there. So everybody's reacting to this and the possibilities of it, but we still need to see what the ACC is going to come back with and say, and then whatever that conversation turns into is where we'll land. And maybe it's in a spot where by 2030, this all breaks up and that aligns with everybody else. I mean, that's the big picture. All I was saying earlier is I don't mind. I love talking about realignment. I'm just not going to pull every single thread of it and go down the rabbit hole of it to where, it's like so far down the future and we're talking about configurations that don't even make any real sense right now. I'm more like, let's speculate a little bit, but let's also keep it somewhat realistic so that we're not off on down the rabbit hole, like I said, talking about this 36 team Big 12. Like, I just don't want to go that deep with it. But this is interesting because this is the big realignment story that's kept the waters going for over a year now. This is the one that's like the big the stand of the non-SEC and Big Ten conferences. They've controlled and picked up all this territory, and really the last remaining frontier is the ACC and Notre Dame to an extent as well. So that's why this is of interest to everybody involved, because of also what it could mean for dozens of other schools, the fallout of this. So it's fascinating stuff, and this is the latest chapter of a book that's had many chapters so
Paul,
far.
would you, if you were Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, would you do this deal right on the table right now?
No, but I would.
Okay.
I would agree to something that was similar to this. Look, there are parts in this where it's incentive based. So if Georgia Tech or Wake Forest go on a run, they have that year where they're going to get money. It's just, this would be Florida State and Clemson most of the time, because historically, since Florida State's been in the league has been won by Florida State or Clemson. Like, occasionally there's another little groundhog pokes their head out of the ground, but for the most part, it's those two schools. So that's why they believe it'll benefit them long term. But I would go back and forth, and I would rather negotiate with Florida State and Clemson this way than through the lawsuits the other way. I think this is better for everybody, because if you're Georgia Tech and Wake Forest, if you say no to any kind of proposal like this, you can say no to this one. Yeah, you shouldn't say no to the first offer. You should say no to the first offer. Like, this is where negotiation happens. But if they're willing to come back and not put the conference in immediate peril, then I think that's worth talking about.
All right. Also, another story that's somewhat always out there, and it kind of like disappears, and then it's still there, and it's not even the settlement, is the Knight Commission meeting in D.C. The Southern Conference Commissioner, Michael Cross, presenting a draft of a new NCAA governance model that divides Division I into Subdivision A, the 4 major conferences, and those that wish that they wish to include, and then Subdivision B, others who have written about this before. What's the difference here than what we've heard about before, that it's going to be separated at some point? It's just that actually there's now a proposal?
Well, I think you're starting to see a groundswell of support from university presidents that are not at the Power 4 level, that know that there's no way for the Southern Conference, any of those schools, to, in any kind of reasonable timeline, raise enough money, put enough effort into things where they can be playing the same game as the power conferences. Like, there's just no way for them to be able to do that. So the quicker you accept things the way that they are and not the way you want them to be, then you can start creating something better. And I think you have, especially with the House settlement, this would have pushed me over the line if I got the House settlement across my desk and I'm in the Southern Conference and I'm having to pay out for athletes that would never even have, they don't even know where my school is, that my school exists, that we're a real thing and not something on television in a fake movie. Then why am I paying for those athletes when it's the other ones who did it? I would be desperate to create a situation that separates me from them.
I can't imagine that is all out of everything with the settlement. And I understand if you're a part of something, you're a part of something. That still, to me, would burn me forever if I was a non-top 70 type school that's a part of the the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and ACC, and Notre Dame. It would burn me to death that we ended up having to make the same payment because of the settlement than somebody else who has 5, 6, 8 times the budget as I do.
I mean, can you imagine being a
WAC? That's part of legal.
Being a WAC team and having to send a check off for this, and then you're like, well, none of these athletes even
You're sending
thought
a
about
check
this.
off to a ship that's sinking to try to patch up the ship, and you're not going to be on the ship if they fix it.
Yeah. You didn't have anything to do with it in the first place. None of this was your thing. You weren't paying your athletes either, but it's not like the people who have, like, none of the television revenue was coming to you either. So, like, none of that was their fault. So,
in the chat room, by the way, I read what Kim had said, among others. How many of you love the realignment talk? I would think it's going to be 95%, don't you?
I think it'll be higher than that. I think it's all fun and valid, and this particular part of it has been the mystery box of when and how and what and where that is seemingly going to unlock everybody's fantasies about what happens next. If you're a South Florida fan, this is of interest now. Mm-hmm. If you're an FSU fan, it's of interest. If you're anybody, it is. I mean, because look, the ACC is right in the middle of it. The Pac-12's just decided to reform. I thought they were joining the Big 12, but I guess not. And so they had to pivot, and there's only so many options, and so they're raising the Pac-12. Well, once they did that, then that brought up schools that were otherwise not at that status, and so then you've got to backfill those, but then you got to add others to those to get to 8 to 10 for the Pac. So, like, now there's all of a sudden all these schools that didn't think any calls were coming anytime soon, and now there's like 5 or 6 phones ringing, and opportunities on the other end to go and join a step up, and there will be an avalanche effect where dozens of schools are now seemingly moving up, right, because of this Pac-12 decision. So between that and this ACC talk of where this has been pretty much nothing but just court jargon for the last several months, and a lot of floating of ideas, whether realistic or not, a lot of speculation. Now we've got a little bit of meat to chew on again, and guess what? That also has a downhill effect on dozens of other schools, because there's the schools in the league, some that want to leave, some that might not, the various places they could go or might not be able to go, the ones who would maybe replace them, who replaces those who replace. So, like, there's this domino effect that we should know as well as anybody, and I think that's why it is of interest, this particular Florida State story, because everybody knows, like, this is the one that's going to affect everybody to some extent. Like, this is the one that's going to be the last, like, huge.
Is this the dam breaking?
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is, and it has been the entire time. It's just that I didn't want to talk about it every single day because we would get sick of it. At least I know that I would. And when there's not something of note to really discuss. So when the court cases are just kind of going back and forth, that's not as much interest. But now that there's actually like, hey, we're going back to the table, or we're back at the table, and like, here's the latest, and here's where this could be going, and you see a date that's much closer than the previous date, and that allows everybody to go, well then how could that... That's why this one's of interest. And yeah, I think 99% of the chat's probably realignment fans, and 99% of our audience over time is probably realignment fans. You just got to understand, we can't talk about it 3 hours, 5 days a week, or we would lose our minds.
Especially if it seems to be, it's just talking about it.
Well, yeah, and like when we don't do a lot of the just riffing that's really not anything. But hey, if you do, you do. This case, though, it's not just riffing. There's this story that's out there that's following another big story that followed another big story. So in the past week, you've had monumental things occur. Like the Pac-12 staying, guys. They were going to die altogether. They were going to go join the ACC. They were going to go join the Big 12. They're staying together. And so that has its effects and has some effects on the ACC. And the ACC, this conversation has effects on a lot of other schools. And so this is front and center for a lot of people, if not everybody in college athletics, because this is going to be, outside of super leagues, which I do believe is a realistic thing. I do. I just don't know like how far out that would be. But beyond super leagues, this is the biggest possible move to come. Yeah, there's no more Texas and Oklahoma moving. There's no more USC and UCLA. The only thing that could happen would be something completely unforeseen, like Notre Dame just wakes up one day and goes, we're joining the SEC or something. Or just out of nowhere, Nebraska's like, we're going to the SEC. But, like, none of those seem like they would make any sense. So beyond just, like, pure fiction, this is the last big shockwave to the college sports landscape at this level.
Well, then don't do it so we can make sure we keep this scratching this itch for the next 5 years. I'm kidding, because it's going to happen. It's inevitable, right? The ACC and whatever happens with them is inevitable. I know that some disagree that they're going to be fine, and then maybe Florida State, Clemson just calm down and everybody agrees to something and they can move forward.
Well, it's inevitable there's going to be a resolution of some sort. It's just that nobody knows how long out. It could be 6 years. It could be 10. It could be 3. It could be this conversation that we're having right here. The other side, the ACC comes back and says, actually, we kind of like this, but we want to make this one change. And then Florida State and Clemson go, okay, and boom, next thing you know, we can at least say 2030, they're getting out. But until then, this is, very much open-ended, but it's important.
And look, we don't know that 2030 would be when they would get out. It just gives them the opportunity to have some more flexibility if they want it, and then keeps them out of court. I think this is, overall, I'm looking at this as someone who wants the ACC to stay together and doesn't want chaos. I do. Like, I do. Like,
I do think it's important,
I know everything that I say that's not exactly on the party line of my tomahawk chopping brethren gets doubted, but I'm not lying.
No, I do agree that you're a college football traditionalist and all that. You don't want to see complete.
No, I don't want to see chaos. I also know that, like, the best thing as a fan for me has been them in that conference winning it when they can. If they're going to the SEC, I can kiss that goodbye. I mean, like, so.
But hey, Paul, as a fan, you get all that money. Oh, wait, that doesn't go to you, does it? Oh, wait, oh, wow.
Yeah. So figure out a way to make it work. I think this is better. Now, I think it's the best thing that can happen in the short term for this to stop, because with every other realignment, there was certainty on things. You know, like the 4 teams that have left the Mountain West, they know how much they're going to pay. They know how much the Pac-2 are going to foot the bill for, and they know where they're going to go, and they know that the TV money will go up because of the situation that they're in. Texas and Oklahoma, they had a plan. They went to the SEC. The 8 teams that went to the Big 12, the teams that went to the Big 10, they had a plan. Clemson, Florida State, and the ACC have no plan outside of the lawsuit in any given day. They've got to stop doing that and just negotiate something out and try to make it work for 6 years. And then after 6 years, at least you're not stuck, and you have, maybe the league can renegotiate some things and be in the market when everybody else is. Because right now, if they stay status quo, they're stuck until 2036, and that's not just bad for FSU and Clemson. That's bad for the other 16 teams in the league.
If they stay stuck till 2036, they're going to get passed by the Big 12, most likely. I mean, maybe not if they can guarantee Florida State and Clemson there for the long haul, but that's also part of this. And the article is the timing with the other TV contracts, the timing of a Super League. If everything was going to start breaking away at that point in time, then they at least would be aligned with the others so that everybody could be making their moves around the same time period. So that's why this timetable would also, quote unquote, be beneficial for everybody. Because, hey, if it's going to happen, at least let's line up with everybody else and not be the ones that are 6 years behind everybody and suffering. So, hey, that benefits you, NC State. See, you could get out too if you need to and go join the Big 12 or do whatever it would be, in front of you, your options that you would have. So, this is the last big piece. There could always be past that, if the Super League's formed, like KU goes to the, something like that has always been out there. But as far as the pathway towards Super Leagues and the pathway towards whatever this looks like to where we get to a point where it settles down and there's just truly not massive seismic movement, this is the last piece of that. This is the significant piece that still remains out there is this ACC piece, and that's why so many people, outside of just loving realignment and loving the chaos and loving their teams moving around, that's why so many eyes are on this particular story, because everybody knows this is going to dictate what version of college sports we're watching on the other side of this thing.